On September 17, 1976, NASA publicly unveiled its first Space Shuttle, and in the most appropriate move ever made by NASA in their history, according to sci-fi nerds like me anyway, they called it the Enterprise. Hi, I'm Chris May, writer, producer, and host of This Day in Weather History, now in its second year from the Weather Network in Canada. Today, that great leap in space advancements took a massive one with the rise of the Space Shuttle on this day in weather history. The original name of this demo model Space Shuttle was actually going to be Constitution, but a massive write-in campaign by Star Trek fans, I was too young at the time, so don't look at me, they urged President Gerald Ford to go with the name Enterprise, and he did. Also, as a brilliant opportunity to marry the imagination of the popular TV series that was about space exploration with the real-life version of space exploration, many of the cast members from the original Star Trek television series attended the opening ceremony. It was perfect. The fans got the name they wanted, and the cast were on hand to make it official. And even though Enterprise was just a test vehicle that never actually reached space, the simple fact that it was here now signaled the true beginning of the Space Shuttle era. Welcome to year 2 of this podcast. Right now, you're listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider. But there's also the daily podcast video short. They're shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective. But oftentimes, they will include visuals from that day's event from when it happened in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. The Great Cold War race has been covered extensively already on this podcast, and today we get to a point where it became really lopsided in favor of the United States. Remember in the September 14th episode of this podcast, This Day in Weather History, I covered the event in 1959 when the Soviets gained another upper hand and looked to start to pull away in the race when they were the first to hit the moon, when they literally crashed into it with a probe. And make no mistake, this was the dawn of a whole new era of spaceflight and exploration. First, the ship itself now looked more like an airplane instead of a missile. And because of this, it also became the first spaceship to fly freely when it was lifted in 1977 to a height of 25,000 feet by a Boeing 747 airplane, and then it was released, gliding back to Edwards Air Force Base on its own. Now, pilots could return the ship to Earth by landing it on a runway just like a plane and use it again. But this September 17th debut was just the birth. The real life began when regular flights of the Space Shuttle began on April 12th of 1981 with the launching of Columbia from Cape Canaveral, Florida. Early shuttles took satellite equipment into space and carried out various scientific experiments. The Space Shuttles made regular stopovers at the old Space Lab. Then, after Space Lab, the Space Shuttles were the only way that our current International Space Station actually got built at all. The shuttle missions then made almost regular commutes to the ISS before the end of the program. And without the ISS, we do not have the eye in the sky to monitor weather and overall climate anomalies. We see all layers of atmosphere. We can see hurricanes, thunderstorms, tornadoes, and yeah, we can chart climate change. And without the STS, we would not have the Hubble Space Telescope that has not only provided our first view into actual outer and then deep space, but has also helped us here understand better what happens on our planet through the events that happen elsewhere out there. So I'd say that the Space Shuttle era of NASA was as critical a time in our human history as we have ever had. And now, as we continue to forge ahead through the 21st century, we have the STS missions to thank for how far they got us in their time. And it was all introduced to the world on a sunny afternoon with the cast of Star Trek on the tarmac, September 17th, 1976. This day in weather history. Tomorrow is September 18th. A hurricane named Maria reached sustained winds of 175 miles per hour or 280 kilometers per hour just before making landfall on Dominica, becoming the first Category 5 hurricane on record to strike the island. It was just weeks after Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Harvey devastated cities around the Gulf of Mexico. But this one went on to be a bigger story than anyone in Puerto Rico could ever have imagined. And we'll let you in on all the details when we are back together again tomorrow, September 18th, on this day in weather history with me, your host, Chris May.